The day my parents sold my future for money, I realized love in my family always came with a price. I still remember sitting at our tiny kitchen table, clutching my college acceptance letter with shaking hands. It was the happiest moment of my life. I had worked 2 jobs, studied through sleepless nights, and sacrificed everything just to earn a scholarship to one of the best universities in the state. But when I showed the letter to my parents, they barely looked at it. My mother only sighed. "That's nice, Emily." My father folded his newspaper and stared at me like I had interrupted something important. Then he said the words that shattered me. "We need you to stay home." At first, I laughed nervously because I thought he was joking, but he wasn't. A wealthy businessman named Richard Hale had offered my father a partnership in his company. In exchange, they wanted me to marry Richard's son, Daniel. I froze. "What are you talking about?" I whispered. My mother leaned closer, like she was explaining something reasonable. "This could change our lives," she said softly. "We've struggled for years. Daniel comes from money. Security matters more than dreams." Dreams. The word echoed in my head while my entire future collapsed in front of me. I begged them to understand. I told them I wanted an education, independence, a life that actually belonged to me. But every sentence I spoke felt invisible. My father slammed his hand on the table. "You're being selfish," he snapped. "Do you know how much we sacrificed for you?" That sentence haunted me for years, because deep down, I knew the truth. They never sacrificed for me, they sacrificed me. But what I didn't know that day was that agreeing to their plan would expose everything hidden beneath our perfect family image. A week later, I met Daniel. He smiled too much, talked too smoothly. Everything about him felt rehearsed. During dinner, he barely asked me a single real question. Instead, he spoke about business deals, luxury trips, and the image we would create together. Not love. Image. When we were finally alone, he looked directly at me and said something that made my stomach twist. "Don't worry," he whispered. "This arrangement helps both our families." Arrangement. Not relationship, not marriage. Arrangement. That night, I cried myself to sleep while my parents celebrated downstairs with champagne. I could hear their laughter through the floorboards, and for the first time in my life, I understood something painful. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was an investment. Until everything changed. The wedding happened 3 months later. I smiled through photos while my heart quietly broke behind every camera flash. My parents looked happier than they ever had in their lives. My mother wore expensive jewelry Daniel's family gifted her. My father kept bragging about his new business position to every guest who would listen. Meanwhile, I felt completely empty. Daniel wasn't cruel in obvious ways. That almost made it worse. He was polite, charming in public, and careful with his words. But behind closed doors, he treated me like decoration. A perfect wife, a perfect image, a perfect business asset. Nothing more. Every decision in our marriage revolved around money, reputation, or appearances. He controlled what I wore, who I spoke to, even how I smiled at events. "You represent both families now," he would say calmly, and every time he said it, I felt smaller. I tried calling my mother once after Daniel embarrassed me during a dinner party. He corrected me in front of everyone. I whispered through tears, "Mom, I don't think I'm happy." Her response destroyed me. "Happiness doesn't pay bills, Emily." I sat there staring at my phone long after the call ended. That was the moment something inside me finally cracked. But what I didn't know that day was that Daniel and my parents were hiding something even worse. Months later, I accidentally overheard a conversation during one of Daniel's business parties. I had gone upstairs to escape the noise when I heard my father's voice coming from Daniel's office. "She still doesn't know?" my father asked nervously. Daniel laughed softly. "She hasn't need to know." My chest tightened. Then came the sentence that changed everything. "The money from her trust helped save your company anyway." I stopped breathing. Trust? I had no idea what they were talking about. Later that night, I searched through old documents hidden in our home office. After hours of digging, I finally uncovered the truth. My grandmother had left me a trust fund before she passed, enough to pay for my education, buy a home, maybe even start my own business someday. But my parents had secretly gained access to it years earlier, and they used it to save my father's failing finances. Then they married me into Daniel's family to secure even more money. I collapsed onto the floor, shaking. Everything suddenly made sense. The pressure, the manipulation, the forced marriage, none of it was about love. I was their financial solution. For days, I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Every memory from my childhood suddenly felt poisoned. But eventually, heartbreak turned into clarity, and clarity turned into strength. I contacted a lawyer in secret, then another. What my parents and Daniel didn't know was that my grandmother protected me more than they realized. Hidden inside the trust documents were evidence showing illegal transfers and forged permissions connected to my parents' accounts. The deeper investigators looked, the uglier the truth became. Daniel's company was drowning in debt. My father had falsified records, and my mother had signed documents pretending to be me. The family that once called me selfish suddenly destroyed my future to save themselves. But now, the truth was finally catching up to them. I didn't scream, I didn't beg, and I didn't warn them. I simply waited. 3 months later, Daniel hosted one of the biggest business events of his career. Investors, executives, reporters, everyone important was there. My parents stood proudly beside him, like they had finally made it. That night, I wore the same fake smile they had forced me to perfect for years. But inside, I was finally free. Halfway through Daniel's speech, federal investigators entered the ballroom. The room fell silent instantly. I still remember my father's face draining of color. One investigator approached Daniel calmly, while another walked directly towards my parents. People started whispering. Cameras turned. The perfect image they built so carefully began collapsing in real time. "What is this?" my mother whispered desperately. But I said nothing, because for once, the truth could speak for itself. Financial fraud, forged signatures, illegal transfers, everything exposed. Daniel tried blaming my father blamed Daniel. My mother burst into tears begging people to listen, but nobody could save them now. The same people who once treated me like property suddenly looked terrified standing without money, power, or status. And the strangest part, I didn't feel revenge the way I thought I would. I felt peace, a quiet, painful peace. Weeks later, I finalized my divorce from Daniel and moved into a small apartment far away from everyone connected to that life. For the first time in years, I woke up without fear sitting in my chest. I went back to school using what remained of my trust fund. It wasn't easy rebuilding my life from the ruins they created, but every small step felt real, mine. One afternoon, my mother called me unexpectedly. Her voice sounded smaller than I remembered. "We lost everything," she whispered. I closed my eyes. Part of me wanted to hate her forever, but another part of me mourned the parents I wished I had. "I know," I answered quietly. Then she asked the question I never thought she would. "How did we lose you?" Tears filled my eyes, because after everything, she still didn't fully understand. "You lost me," I whispered, "the moment money mattered more than your daughter." She started crying softly, and for the first time in years, I hung up without feeling guilty. Sometimes people think revenge is about destruction, but honestly, the greatest revenge is surviving the people who tried to break you. It's rebuilding your life after betrayal. It's finding peace after years of manipulation. And it's finally understanding your worth, even when the people who were supposed to love you never did. My parents chose money over me. In the end, they lost both.